Excellent. Right, so you'll just have to sign. You just have to make sure they're signed.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're sorry.
I'm sorry. It's not me.
Yeah.
I believe so.
It says so.
No. There's some.
It's pretty sad that I saw you. I was supposed to see a softball here, but.
Hang on.
Anyone else like that?
I'm good.
Yeah, it's Scott's.
Yeah.
I'll take a hard sign.
Yeah. I don't know where you get that's just yeah, that's nice.
Oh, this is just cheap. Training classes, because I'm doing 2 hours and 3.
Don't worry, as you get older, your eyesight will get it.
Yeah, I used to do it. Just chill. Glasses. I start wearing glasses. But I have.
Transitional ones I have now.
Are we about ready?
Yes, we are. Mayor Holtzclaw, Mayor Pro Tem Vignal, members of council, members of our community, as well as valued members of our team here in the administrative.
Michael, I think I need to open the meeting formally first.
Okay, let's do it.
And I will call the July 28th, 2021 special meeting of the Mill Creek City Council to order, just less than 23 hours after we left last night. So, Michael and Karen, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Holtzclaw, Mayor Pro Tem Vignal, members of council. I want to acknowledge and thank members of our community for joining the retreat this evening, as well as valued members of our administrative team, Director Mike Todd, our planning manager, Tom Rogers, and their new first day on the job, our deputy city manager, Martin Yamamoto, has joined us this evening as well. So I was explaining to Martin earlier today what we're doing here this evening. This is the first time we've engaged in my career here in a mini retreat on a single topic, that being the DRCC. And this culminates a number of months worth of hard work led by our very capable consultant, Karen Reed, who's going to take the mic here in a moment. And the idea is, as we go into the fall, we're already talking about the budget. And what we want to know is, what is it that we now want to do since we've come this far, working with Karen as a consultancy for this leg of the journey? Is there's a potential that we would want to work with other consultants depending on the direction we receive from council. So we thought that this would be an opportunity in a more organic, less structured way, although Karen does have a structure tonight. Our intention is at the end of tonight's meeting, we get a little more definition as to where council would like us to go in the fall, and then we'll go back. We've got a number of members of our team joining on the screen. Our finance director is especially interested in what council's priorities are as it relates to this. That may determine how we make plans and allocate funding accordingly for the fall. I also want to say that as we talk about this mini format for a single topic item, I believe there's an opportunity for us to also have other single topic agenda mini format retreats. The one that I'm especially passionate about is the longer term financial forecast for the city of Mill Creek. And they have some discussions that talk about the historic financial structure of the city, as I understand it, has been able to pay its bills through the year, and what we might need to consider going forward for long-term financial planning for the city. There's other topics also on the agenda, but to the extent that they're all culminating in a robust fall schedule for us, we really want to get direction. We don't want to lose momentum on this topic while we're serving up a number of others on the plate for council's consideration for many retreat topics in the fall. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you members of the community for coming out this evening. And I'll turn the floor over now to Karen.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, council members. It's been so long since we've seen one another. It's good to be here, and it's very odd to be here talking to you in this format. But thank you for coming back and doing this. Everybody should have this packet in front of you. This is sort of our roadmap for the evening. And we'll get you out from behind the diocese after about an hour, and we'll do an exercise with you all, and then we'll go back and have some more discussion, and then we'll get you out again for another exercise. So this will be up, down, fight, but hopefully not the fighting part. And so thank you again for being here. Tonight's main agenda is just to give you all a more extended opportunity to talk to one another about the dots in there more, sure, but properties and what you would like to see happen on those properties. We're not making any final decisions tonight. We'd like to get a new updated fix on your current thinking individually and as a group and see if things are coalescing, or if not, how we can help move things forward as we go into the fall. And we won't, I think we won't be asking for a whole lot of direction on the fall budget tonight. We are anticipating a second retreat with you all for that specific purpose, hopefully in September sometime, to sort of really give us a focus direction on where you want to take this budget wise in 2022. So the first thing on our agenda tonight is just a discussion as you all enjoy your dinner. And I'm going to probably just sort of, hopefully we could do some roundtables as we go, and I'll take notes at some points along the way. And of course, it's being recorded, so we can also have the benefit of that. So I'm on then agenda item 2 here, and I thought we might start just with the roundtable, asking you all what kind of takeaways or impressions, reactions did you have from the panel discussion we had last night with representatives from the Kirkland Performance Center, the Renton IKEA Performance Center, the Lake Stevens Community Center, sports fields complexes in the city of Everett, and I'm forgetting one, but I think that was, Boys and Girls Club in Snohomish County. So you want to just start with like, what reactions did you have, or what stuck in your mind after that experience? And if anybody is not chewing and wants to go first, that'd be awesome.
I guess I'll bite the apple first. I thought the presentations yesterday were very enlightening as to the ins and outs of their process, starting them, the costs involved in doing so, and some of the ongoing costs and maintenance as well, and revenues as well. So that was very helpful. In terms of narrowing it down, I'm not actually sure it did very much narrowing for me, because whether it was a performing arts theater where some were profitable and some weren't, it shows that there's a possibility for profitability in it, or at least being revenue neutral, which is a good thing. Boys and Girls Club, also a positive thing, given that it's no upfront cost to the city, which is always a good thing with these large projects. And same thing with the ballparks as well, given that they have the potential to bring in tournaments and other types of revenue generation. So it didn't quite narrow it for me, but that's not a bad thing. I like to be open-minded and to keep all options open, and to maybe facilitate a number of these different uses, presuming we have the space for it.
Anyone want to go next? Yes, Councilmember Kevin. We know you missed last season. I don't know if you had any chance to watch the final, so.
Well, I have not had a chance to watch. Sorry to everybody for not attending last night. It was pretty much unavoidable. But I think we, maybe just to dovetail a little bit on Councilmember Morgan, what he was just stating about the options. Yeah, we're not married to anything at this point. I think this is an exciting time. There's a lot of opportunities here, and even I've moved from my original stance of wanting to, strictly ball fields. I'm open to pretty much anything as long as we can, maintain costs, right? I never want us to ever forget our role, right? We're a city of 20,000 citizens, and who bears the brunt of the tax structure here. So we can't overpromise and underproduce. That's the big one for me. So we have to be able to, it has to be able to bring revenue in to cover the costs. And if I may, let me do two quick things here. I want to give a quick shout out to Director Todd over there for putting some information together for me on Sunday when he didn't have to. His teamwork's really appreciated. And Tammy Dunn from Snohomish County Sports Commission is here. And I asked her to just listen in. Her and I discussed a few potential options and partnerships from private sector as well. So maybe we can enter into that part of the conversation as well.
Great, thank you. Anyone want to go next here? We have to get all Socratic on you, Will. You know I'm not afraid. So go ahead, Deputy Premier.
I can do next. For me, last night, the takeaway, really, what I got was how important it is for us to have a vision to pull together. There's so many moving pieces here, And we need to really be able to visualize what we want to accomplish. And also that funding sources come from a broad range of partnerships. And that we need to be looking at all those areas and not just focus in one space. There were corporations, there was the state, there was national money, there was local money, REIT money. I mean, it's coming, it seems that they're pulling a package in from multiple sources with a big vision and setting out stages of what they want to accomplish in order to make it a reality. So for me, that was my takeaways. It's very important to have that vision in place and to look into lots of different revenue sources and not just go down one path in order to fund it.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll be starting to build towards that vision again this evening here. Anyone want to go next too? Go ahead, Jeff.
It's kind of hard to condense all of my thoughts because there's a lot of different information. But a couple thoughts that I learned through last night and stuck with me was number one, there are so many different choices here, which way we can go, but the one that stuck clear was wherever we go, where we can meet the needs of our community, when we can become a solution, a source, an opportunity to the community. I think that's important. We talked about everything from weddings and funerals to business meetings, to events, to multi-purpose rooms, to places to hold classes and courses and things like that. I got excited when I saw that wherever we go with this, it should be one, an extension and an opportunity for our community to come together. And it should, whenever possible, come together, all of our community. There are some that are so good for certain segments of our community, be it the seniors or the youth or whatever, but as it can encompass more different groups, I think that has an inherent value. I will say it, what everyone else is thinking too, it sounds pretty good when Boys and Girls Club come and says, just give us the land and we'll raise the money, we'll build the structure, we'll run it for you. City goes, well, that's pretty darn easy and pretty good chance you can't fail. If they're going to do everything, but the problem or concern I have with that was, or thoughts that came to my mind was, what control would we have over that? And what control do we have for our city, and what can we say of what they do or don't do with that facility for our citizens? And there's space. I understand what they're looking for, about a 12 to 13 acre space with the 18 acres we have and a lot of wetlands. Pretty much could suck up the whole thing. So that was an option. That was just a takeaway that I had. The other thing on the performance space, I really have to thank you for bringing those people in because they allowed us to go in depth. That when we talk about a performance space, what we really got a chance to see was it can go from A to Z. We saw the Cecil B. DeMille Junior Fifth Avenue type of performance space down to a performance space, which basically provides the lights, the sound, the theater, and the ability. And there's a big discrepancy between the two. And so that, and what we decide we want to design going forward would be very important. We still have so many questions. I did try to ask a lot of that about dollars, about costs, about how to fund. And I think that's where if we look at information that's still out there is how, and until we decide what we want, we really can't answer these, but how will we fund it? And how much would it cost and what are the expectations? Will it be a burden on the city? Will it not be a burden on the city? Will it be a revenue opportunity for the city? We don't know until we come up with a couple of particular decisions.
So one of the things that I appreciated about last night was actually getting some of the guidelines from those that lived this experience that they had kind of, if you're going to do it, at least do it this many seats. If you're going to do the theater, at least do this many seats. If you're going to do the ball fields, at least do this many fields to be able to have a tournament. If you're going to do it right, which means you're going to need to have this level of funding before it's really worth talking about. Or not that you have that, that's the scope that you should be looking at. So I felt that those were really helpful in helping us to figure out what that means. And to Mayor Pro Tem's point, that revenue sources or partners in here and the revenue sources that we could have for potentially building it, or any partnerships that we can build, come from many different directions: federal, state, county, Puget Sound Regional Council, I think it was another one. Any of the private entities, any fundraising that we can do out in the community, all these types of things, and all the different potential revenue streams as well. There's still a wide open possibility for all of these different things. But I think one of the things that I got and that I personally believe is, if you're going to do it right. Don't halfway anything that you decide you're going to do. So if you're going to do it fully, and don't try to do any half measures. If you're going to don't halfway get there, just do it right and do that. And I think that's really important, that when we're doing this, we do it right, even if it takes a little extra time. So that was really one of the key takeaways for me. So thank you.
Councilmember Bond?
We've got a variety of needs that we could fill here, so we've got lots of options. And maybe historically ball fields have been done a few times, so it's kind of comfortable to us. We've done it, we know how to do it, we know there's a need. I will say that with the discussion last night, I got kind of excited about the notion of a community center or performing arts. It's clearly something our city lacks, and that some members that showed up last night and others that haven't would benefit from, and would still enhance our quality of life here. Doing it right, according to one of the experts, was $40 to $80 million, and even at one point threw out $300 million. I got a little bit sticker price. I felt like we're looking for a car when we started at the Lamborghini dealership. I probably need to find a Honda lot, maybe the used Honda lot. But it is fun to look at Lamborghinis. It is. The thing I took away as I walked out last night, a little bit disheartened. I had sticker shock. Like, how can we do this? But then it occurred to me, they did it. Every one of them found a way to do something very challenging and may have appeared impossible. One folks group took 20 years, he said. I mean, I hope that we don't take that long, or we get credit for the time we've been putting in. As Brian pointed out, we bought this property a while ago. But they did it. So maybe we can find a path to something exciting and that will bless our citizens as well.
Yeah, what a good.
Is it on now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna pick up where Mark left off, because that was the point that I was gonna say, is there's some pretty cool projects that have been developed in other communities, and we need to keep dreaming. And we need to dream and then find a way to make it happen, rather than dream and then give up and find a way not to make it happen. The other two takeaways were, what I heard a lot last night and tonight were what our community needs. Not what our city needs, what our community needs. And I think we need to keep that in mind. We're not talking about a facility. Is my battery going dead? Okay. Is it still on? Whatever is done on the site isn't going to serve just the residents of Mill Creek, it's going to serve the community, which is the greater Mill Creek community, which goes beyond our corporate boundaries. And then the final thought was, and I began to think about it, and it goes to the point Councilmember Stecker was making and Councilmember Bond made. We have a lot of needs. And to some extent, we have these artificial boundaries where the city ends and another municipality begins. So we're talking about what to do with 14 acres the city owns, about a half mile away from a large, in my opinion, underutilized green space with some fields at McCollum Park. When I hear, well, should we pick this over that, I began thinking, shouldn't we be talking with the county and saying, what should we do on our site and what can we do on the county site to meet all of these needs together? So maybe we shouldn't be looking at this just with the tunnel vision of what is on our site. We should be looking at it as what can we do on both sites to possibly meet all these needs. So Keep dreaming, all of us.
That's the, thank you all. That is the perfect segue, Mr. Mayor, to the sort of second bullet under item 2 here. A very quick information updates. We wanted to make sure that folks knew that the county is looking at doing some changes in McCollum Park. And Mike's going to speak a little bit to that. Briefly, it's a gleam in their eye and not an immediate thing, but
Yeah, so I guess what I'm gonna direct over here to this map, I'll just bring it over this way. So this came out, remember early on, we talked about a facilities survey of what's out there. So we started kind of crowdsourcing with what we could think of in terms of other kinds of similar. What Karen's pointed out is the McCollum Park, so this is Mill Creek right there, 4-mile scale. So this is kind of 4 miles from Mill Creek. There's some remarkable amount of things that are close to us. We don't think about being that close to Edmonds or Buffalo Field, but we're actually, that's a proof line, not very far away. What she's talking about here, right here in McCollum Park, I put it as a community center to the grand plans for McCollum Park in the near term, do the farm to market thing. They just got $2.5 million to do, farmers market, commercial kitchen, community space, probably small. Their bigger dream is to take that old landfill and turn it green and turn it into an urban center. Right here, we have the long-term growth at the intersection of I-5 and SR 96, 128, as we know it, is an urban center in a long-term plan. So the county's saying, in our 20-year plan, what's going to happen there? And so as Brian mentioned, we've talked about it internally too, is that we're right, hop, skipping, and jumping away. So doing something for the city and or something for the county makes sense to kind of coordinate. So I think that's what the mayor was talking about.
let's point out those sound transit routes also.
Yeah, so the other thing we talk about this map was here's the blue line. It was Swift Bus Rapid Transit up and down Highway 99. Here is the green line that's now operating by Boeing down to Canyon Park off the bottom edge, comes through Mill Creek. And the orange line is coming in 2024 that's going to connect us to Linwood Light Rail right here in Linwood, and then go on over to Edmonds Community College. I also put on there, a lot of us don't know about it, but the Sound Transit also has a BRT line that's going to be up 105. It's going to connect to Linwood Light Rail. So a lot of things happen in 2024. Light rail gets to this point, which is going to kind of change people's commute patterns and potentially, and going to change things going on. It struck us that the fact that we've got a lot of BRT lines going right through Mill Creek is something we should think about as we're doing our long-term plan. So that's kind of what's going on here. Other things we can talk about later. Take a look at this. If you've got things that we missed, but in general, we try to put green dots in significant fields that a youth sports organization might find access to, like at the high schools, or soccer fields for a tournament, or Phil Johnson heard about last night at Cash Park. We put things like here's the multiple field Boys and Girls Club. Probably not accessible to us, but it's not that many miles away. But here's the Mill Creek Y. We often forget about them. Have some of the similar kind of programs. City Hall has community space. Not very big, but we do have community space. So that's the kind of thought. Very few performing arts centers. Edmonds over here. As you guys noticed, there's not a lot of other spots. And so that's one of the things I think you guys talked about last night. I guess at that point, well, this is the other thing we put. There was before and after school childcare, which is one of the things that Mr. Sukalis talked about last night. It's the function that Boys and Girls Clubs provide. This is where the Y presently conducts that. It's all the 10 elementary schools in the south end of the district. So we should just be aware of that as we're thinking about other facilities. I think that was all you wanted to do.
That's perfect. So again, my thanks to Mike for his crew for putting this together. We thought we'd just continue to build it out. If you know facilities and you during a break, you can look at this like, oh, that's big. It's not there. What might go? We'll try to build this out as our sort of what's in the hood that we should be thinking about. And then the only other update I wanted to just remind, we're going to have obviously some the fire contract will be consuming all of air next year, and one way or another we'll be going to the voters with something around fire funding for the future, and so that we just wanted to, that's out there. We just need to be mindful of the time, but it does take these things have a long runway. The projects we're talking about is not a pretty long runway. So that was just sort of some of the context. And we'll talk a little bit now. I wanted to sort of move to each of the 5 facility types and spend about 30 minutes, 25 minutes or so, 5 minutes on each time, just sort of scattershot ideas at me, and I'll try to capture what I can. we wanted to sort of talk about each of the types of facilities. So I'm going to start with the community center. I'm looking at agenda item 2 here. If you want to look at that table, we're going to just sort of go through what kind of community needs and issues, concerns does this address? What are there sort of potential, and just speak to any of these that strike you as interesting or compelling. Potential partners, potential opposition, ideas around phasing, other companion uses that are really logical for this, other pros and cons that you've been sort of mulling about, and if there's any sort of a big question that you have, missing data about one of these, we'd like to make a note of that. So I may not be able to capture every word you say, but we're hoping to, I will be taking notes as you offer any ideas that you have in the next 5 minutes about community centers. So this is sort of a brainstorming data.com. What are you thinking about each of these types of facilities separately at this point with respect to partners, phasing, community, problem solved, who would use it, questions that you have. Does that make sense? Okay. So if anybody wants to fire away on community centers, and just keep going, otherwise we'll go down the line. That's not nearly as exciting. One step out forward.
A community center would be a place that we could have a more senior community space. 'Cause I get lots of complaints that they have to license where it is now. Also, when I think of a community center, I also think of some places that staff recreation. So I'm not sure which type they're talking about. I think the place that's also got basketball courts.
I would piggyback on that too, because it can't be one dimensional, right? We're trying to accommodate a large population here and for lack of a better term, make everybody happy, but it has to be multifunctional. And I certainly love to see those types of facilities. Here's some additional.
Art, David, what's your word?
A couple of the folks last night shared weddings and end of life and celebrations that facilities like this could meet that need. And I hadn't really thought about that, but when they said it, it resonated, makes sense.
Okay. Anything else?
I was thinking along that line, the ability to develop large, I mean, very large multi-purpose rooms, something we don't have in our community for banquets, for functions like funerals, weddings. Our community groups could use it for their fundraisers. Large scale multi-purpose rooms.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think the thing with the community center is it serves the greatest segments of our population. It can provide services for youth, for people in midlife and people at the later stages of life.
Good. That's one of the principles that you guys have.
Yeah, I'd like to second that one. And it's primarily designed for use by a broad range of demographics. I think that's important to me, is that it'd be lots of different kinds of space, some smaller, some bigger, teach classes there, all the different types of things we're talking
How about for partnerships or things that you're still kind of are a mystery or phasing? Go ahead.
Well, I related to that, I think community center possibly is also one of the best opportunities to combine uses. I mean, I think the community center with a performing arts facility as a component of it marries more naturally than with the ball fields.
Yeah, right, okay. Good. Anyone else? Any pros or things you're worried about, like this community might have this concern or that concern? Logical partners that spring to mind on this?
I think some of the logical partners are the early stage learning is such a big focus, especially at the county and the state level. They want their cities to be able to provide those kinds of services. And this is in mind as we're building our community center to provide that, as well as for senior services, as somebody mentioned, but also that's also serving the needs that our state, federal, our county and state government have earmarked.
Yeah, okay. Boys and Girls Club. Right, okay, Boys and Girls Clubs. Pros, cons, users, problem solved, community needs met.
I think the Boys and Girls Club can incorporate, basically some things they're saying, many of these things that we've listed as community center, while also offering the space for the boys and girls and having, somewhere for them to come after school, to add more amenities there.
Piggybacking on that, just the proximity of the DRCC to Heatherwood and Jackson High, that becomes a natural, I guess, stop off point, I might think, on the way home, or it's not too far from the school that they could easily go there and then come home.
Not just proximity to the schools, but the housing that's around it. That's where we have the density of multifamily housing with a lot of youth. So that's a unique site for that demographic.
He also indicated that sometimes they can have ball fields also. So it opens up an opportunity to, space, see if we can add ball fields or a ball fields around it as well. So you can use it for outdoor sports as well as indoor sport.
There's also then proximity to Collin Park. Where you mentioned that if we didn't incorporate ball fields, any type of fields there, it's not a very long walk from the DRCC location to Collin Park.
I think it also gives us an opportunity. I think one of the things I wanted to see originally was creating a sports complex. So, having a multi-purpose, where you can play basketball, indoor soccer, whatever it is they're doing these days, coupled with our fantastic Little League park and our soccer fields. I think it would fit in nicely, but I was surprised at the footprint of 13 acres.
Yeah.
That's one, might be one con for me right there.
Anyone else? Is that what you were talking about, control issues?
Yeah, I agree with both. Thanks, but I agree with all the pros that were listed, but then there are some cons. But I don't want to say I do agree with pros. Cons are the land use. Second con for me was it definitely fills a certain segment, the youth. But does it cross over to the senior market, to the other individuals? That was one of my concerns. Is it a possible conflict with our, partner, the YMCA, who does provide a lot of these services? That was another potential concern. And then my other one is that weird little control question I had that I think just needs more discussion. But if we build this, then if they built this and they pay for this, is this their facility? And can it provide the services? We have input as to we want you to provide services to these organizations. We want you to do this. We want you to do that. Or is it really, hey, it's our Boys and Girls Club?
Yeah, I will offer that when I reviewed the operating agreement for the Bellevue Club that is in the facilities report, you can see the city there reserved a number of rights to use the facility for free for a certain number of hours and a number of other conditions about how they, the Boys and Girls Club, would use it. So I think you could, there are certainly, if you're giving them the land, you have some ability to ask for stuff.
I was going to bring up that point as well as what Bill, I think it was last night, and mentioned that they have a number of different models that they use in different situations. It sounds like they're very flexible. They would like to have a facility there. It sounds like they'll incorporate a lot of what we're looking for. It sounds like to me, they're very open to that idea. So I think that could be a very good partner for us.
Anyone else?
We did have the YMCA and Bill Sakalas in the same room a couple of years ago. I think Mike was part of that meeting, and there is no conflict between the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club. They would cohabit, use the facilities at different times. So, and I think the control is completely subject to our negotiation with them. I'm not sure the facilities. I mean, they've partnered with cities on these facilities, but I'm not sure that they've done what we're throwing out there, which is a true community facility where the city is still actively wanting to use the building as opposed to just having a standalone Boys and Girls Club. So I'm not sure Bill could point us to any example where there have been partnerships in developing it, but not partnerships in operating and maintaining it, because typically it's turned over to the Boys and Girls Club and they operate out of the building.
As I said, I think you'll find some examples of that in shared operating models and shared use models that are a little bit different than what they're doing here. But as you said, Mr. Supalis really emphasized in our discussions with him, they're very, very flexible and want to know what the city would want. Yeah, Councilmember Vaughn.
So it's a big pro in my book that they're the most fiscally viable partnership at the moment.
Anyone else? Right. Third one. It's the forming arts centers. Yes. So again, what problems does it solve? How is it in terms of the users? Pros, cons, data points missing, partnerships?
There's a clear need. There's a clear need in the community. We don't have this. And there, although it may run somewhat of a deficit, there's an economic development piece to a performing arts center that is intriguing.
Might also lend itself to naming rights or other revenue generating options like that.
I mean, performing arts center as a category, I agree, is a need. I do not think it makes sense as a standalone on the site. But for the same reason, I don't think Fields to me makes sense as a standalone, because I don't think it serves enough of our constituency.
I would agree. I think that it's a nice idea for 150,000 residents. If you're that size, I think it's too one-dimensional and really doesn't solve a lot of needs. Doesn't fit in a lot of wheelhouses.
Yeah, and one general thought, not specific to this, but I don't remember who made the comment about economic development. You know, it's an interesting philosophical, theoretical question about, should we be concerned if it pays for itself? How much do we charge for using our parks? And that's an amenity that we provide as a city to our citizens, and we pay for the operation and maintenance. Not saying that we shouldn't have our eye on the ball and on the costs, but we don't know how those revenues could come back to the city. You have a facility that could generate direct revenues, but you could have a facility where we have an O&M cost. But what if it's bringing in thousands of people to our restaurants that are eating dinner and buying stuff in our city? So we're not getting the direct revenue, but we're getting the sales tax revenue. So there's a lot of different ways to measure the economic benefit of something that has to our city. So, and there are aspects of amenities that we provide as a city to our citizens and we don't charge.
I don't know if this is a pro or con, just a thought, because after listening to them last night, it seemed to me that the Performing Arts Center was most viable mixed in with other things like the community center. Because you say, I forget who it was saying that, you know, like they have the space for the senior citizens to come in and do things, that they're doing lots of different things. So it seemed to me mixed in with other options like the community center was the most viable option for having the performing arts.
Karen,
Not really pro or con.
Can you clarify for me? I wasn't clear on Kirkland. Is it a multi, because I drive by there all the time. My parents live down in Kirkland and I see the front of the building for the theater and I never realized it was part of it's not a standalone theater. Is that, am I correct about that?
I think it is a standalone facility, but it is located in a civic plaza,
Oh, okay.
civic campus where they have the senior center and the library and big municipal parking garage and some parks and ball fields and stuff. So it's all in that central.
Yeah,
corridor.
it's actually a tour facility. It's a theater connected to a full warehouse and shop area that then is connected to a senior center and then connected to an office building, multi-story office building that is part of where they house their staff. So that is, all of that is the Kirkland Performance Center.
So was that, I'm trying to remember, was that owned and run by the city as opposed to I think the Renton facility was a foundation or a,
A 501.
501c3.
right, but the Kirkland is owned by the city of Kirkland.
Yes.
Right. Right, so it's a very different operation and has multifacets to it. One thing I was going to mention on the Performing Arts Center, of all the things that we've looked at, the thing that excites me most about this one is it meets the needs. It does the best job of meeting the most needs of the majority, of a vast majority of the population, youth, seniors, adults. To me, it provides so many different types of services that touch on every, as opposed to one segment, it touches all segments of our population. That to me was a real positive. And I want to reinforce what Councilmember Bond said. It was in the survey what they stated, the one thing, the most important thing they felt that was missing from the city of Mill Creek was a theater or performance center. That
I
was,
thought it was Frisbee golf.
you know, that's,
Yeah.
no, that was, no, the one, the number one, yeah, that was up there maybe, but no, the number one thing that was missing was a arts or performance center.
Anyone else on thoughts about?
Yes,
Yes, I
so
know.
negative is extremely expensive. Positive is we may have more control over it, should that be something we want, or at least the user groups says, you know, if it's not getting rented out as much as we thought it would, there might be churches that want to use the facility Sunday mornings or something, which would actually fit very nicely for most of their needs. So we might be able to find other revenue sources if it's not filling up with comedy shows and piano recitals or whatever other stuff is going on.
That was something that I recognized from last night was the amount of opportunity to rent the facility. That the other theaters are all saying, it's not dark, we're not dark. People want to rent the place.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So one thing where I do have a worry is if you just look in the rear view, just a year back past COVID, how these buildings were vacant wastelands essentially. And again, it's staying in your lane, knowing the size of your city, who bears the cost and who's going to have to absorb all of that. So again, it just doesn't seem like the economically viable option for a city our size.
One thing noted from the IKEA Center was 10 years in, there was a fizzle and shift. And I made a special note of that because that really sounded interesting to me, that they've had this where it kind of had a downturn and they decided, that's it, we're doing an entirely different thing, we're not running it that way anymore. And he said now they mostly rent it out to a number of dance troupes, I think it was. And so that's how they turned on that. And but at the same time, they said that they operated a loss and they knew that going in. So I think it's important, as Mayor mentioned, that we know, are we providing a service or are we making sort of neutral, or are we trying to make a profit?
Well, if we're talking to standalone performing arts facilities, the other thing I took away from last night is I think all the cities, or all the ones that are run, had a staff.
And that one had a staff of one. That was a unique one too,
Had a staff.
that's number one.
No, which one? Was that the rent?
That was another one. But the Renton one was unique about that. That was owned by the school district.
Well, that was actually several of the other facilities that we looked at your request were also
Right.
Owned by the school districts. And I'm thinking in this context, I see a school district as a particularly interesting partner.
I would see a potential partnership, yes, as a positive with the Everett School District. But I also, from what research I've done, there is a risk of ownership by a school district, because then it becomes an asset to them. And I think that the revenue that they want to pay to rent the facility is going to be significantly less, because they're going to pay for themselves and want to charge themselves. So I think Partnership with a school district is a pro, ownership by a school district could be a negative. And I think we're seeing that with some of the theaters that are owned by schools.
By the top. Okay. Well,
Good.
Ball fields, what do you think about ball fields?
I thought they did bring up the point that if you're gonna need at least 4 fields if you want to have a tournament. And the tournaments are a significant way to do that. They brought up good points though as well, that there are different sports that could make use of the facility year round. And so we don't need to just think of it as baseball, but it's also soccer, it's
Lacrosse.
lacrosse, I think was it, yeah, there was like field hockey that they mentioned, there were a number of different sports that they mentioned that go throughout the year. And so it's an important factor.
This would ball fields on a scale like this turns the Mill Creek Sports Park into the Mill Creek Sports Complex. It makes us a regional player. And I think with ball fields, there's a lot of potential for not just partnerships, but to be revenue positive for the city. As I went over the comp plan last night, that was 2 nights ago, it was originally the vision, and I wouldn't mind sticking somewhere in there. I definitely want to keep having this conversation with ball fields, especially with the county maybe wanting to expand over there. I think this just creates regionally, makes us a player.
So the county's a possible partner. So, or am I making that up?
I don't know, I'm not gonna say this is a pro or con. My ongoing question is, I still am not clear what, if any, we keep talking about tournaments, we're gonna bring in all these tournaments. Well, we would be competing against Cash Park and Phil Johnson, which are capturing a lot of them. I'm still not clear what unmet demand is out there that we would capture. And I'm not sure that we have the size of property that we're talking about to do what is really needed to create what you're talking about. That's what got me thinking about Willis Tucker. I'm not sorry, not Willis Tucker, McCollum. I mean, there's a lot of underutilized space there that something could be done with, and it's got that huge parking lot right there with all the parking, which is what got me thinking about maybe that's the ideal location for a regional sports complex.
Plus, it's already flat.
It's already flat, yeah, and then, maybe we focus our property on the community center and a farmer's market type gathering and performance center built into it.
We're just putting the pros and cons of ball.
Yeah, and so the con for me was I'm not sure we have the size or that there's an unmet demand. I'm not saying that I know that I didn't call the con because I don't have enough information.
So those are good questions. You have any questions
So
or comments?
ball, I heard last night the gentleman say 4 was sort of a minimum. We've had other people share that 3 is minimal. Our property could not accommodate 4, we could accommodate 3. And girls softball is looking for places to host their tournaments. There is demand for there that I have heard. I don't have anybody participating in my family. But I've heard feedback that that it not only is a demand, but that it does provide revenue sources. So, and similar to the fiscal benefits of drawing people into the performing arts center, they go to dinner, they hit the bars, have drinks, whatever. To the benefit to the businesses, local businesses, you could make a similar argument on the economic side for the ball fields and the tournaments, potentially if we were able to find a path to that.
And for tournament size and structure, we can't just look at it that they're all centralized just in this one spot. There's so many, I mean, just at the 2 fields by Tambark, potential at McCollum Park, the potential at the high school, arena sports, all of these venues provide additional space and footprint for a regional sports hub.
Positive is, I'll although expensive, cheaper than some of the community center and performing arts center options, but less likely to get corporate sponsorship, I think. Not entirely sure, but it seems like the other ones have a better chance.
One potential con.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it serves every age group and every ability group in our community. I think that this might be focused more towards the younger spectrum.
I have a thought too, this isn't really, once again, this is not our con, that we need to look into, after walking the space and doing our tour, how hilly it is and how much space is wetlands. Looking, really taking a good look at what it would take to flatten that space in order for us to do ball fields. So maybe that's a cost. Not that it's a con, but it's something we need to know and go to our eyes open, what that would take. I think.
And whatever we do, I don't want to forget about the need for parking on all of this, so.
Karen, I have one comment that too, that I'd like to add, and there's a lot of great positives about the ballpark, about the ease of creating it, the revenue that we heard, and lower risk factor, but I haven't really seen, it kind of goes on with the mayor's, and I haven't seen the great demand for it. I haven't seen the demand, or the unmet demand from the community, the request from the community for it, and the surveys. I haven't seen that. Please build us more ball fields.
Anyone else? Last call? Those are the four major ones. Is there an appetite to talk about the other ones, or would you like to move on? Natural lands and trails?
Well, so I would be mildly interested in the natural lands and trails. I think we ought to at least take a look at that. One thing I would say is that could potentially have the least environmental impact and also one of the lower cost ranges.
Anyone else on natural lands and trails?
I will maybe add to that as well. West of 527, our comp plan indicates a lack of park space for children and whatnot. So there's a small little patch, I think, at the baseball field. That's it, just not enough. So there's clearly a need for some park space down there.
It could tie into North Creek Trail to expand the whole North Creek Trail with that vision and to make it more desirable and some kind of trails or park space that would make it there.
Adding that, especially through, it may make a really good use of Coca property.
Yeah.
Whereas some of the others may not make a very good use of property.
Yeah, that's really steep. And mostly.
Some of the choices that we're looking at need quite a bit of land and some do not. I think depending on the choices that we go with, there might be an opportunity to develop some of Dobson for parks. Other choices, there's not going to be land.
What else?
Does the natural lands and trails lend itself well to Frisbee golf?
Good. Good design.
So, and we talked about that already. I was surprised just as you were at the amount of folks that were into it. And when I was down in Florida, I was even more surprised that every time I would pass a sign, Frisbee golf, 10 miles, such and such lane, and I was just pretty shocked by that. And every time I mentioned it to somebody, they go, "Oh yeah, it's getting big. Yeah, I did it last week. Yeah, you should try it out." So, I mean, incorporating that around the wetlands or the park space is definitely something that's a possibility. And one thing we're known for in this city is that all of our parks have a niche. And if we could have in this area create a niche like this is our free, whatever, it's a 9-hole that you can just do over and over again. I don't even know how big they are, but it's worth having the conversation and we'll definitely fill that niche.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that we sort of wanted to try to get your sense of is really focusing in on how well you think these if you sort of talked around it, so I'm gonna, we have a poster for this, but in the interest of time, what I think I'd like to do, if it's okay, is give you guys this handout, and if you're bored,
It's in your packet, but here's one you can write.
this is a freestanding matrix, and the idea is to just go and rate each of these uses with respect to the 6 principles that you've identified. And we'll do the math for you if you guys will fill it out. And again, the rating from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest, really strongly supports this, and 1 being this really doesn't do anything for this goal at all. So you guys want to take 5 and do that, and then we will move on to our next exercise. All right.
Karen, just real quick, did you want us to rank or like put them in order, or do you want us to?
No, not rank orders.
Just give them a
Everything could
score.
be a 5, or everything could be a 1.
Gotcha.
There's no rank ordering, just this use meets this principle, how well.
Okay, thank you. I didn't know how your scoring system might work, so.
Well, it's a good question. I should have clarified it from.
Karen, what when we're done?
Yes. Yeah. All right, look at that, through the mail slot.
All right, Bill.
We got a safety violation. You dropped it where the cord is not taped down. Now we're in trouble.
Anybody else? Right, down over here. Excellent. So we're gonna get to numbers. Stephanie gets back to and we'll tabulate all these and let you know, with help from my friends, we will tabulate and let you know where people came out. Still in the homework. All right, so hopefully Stephanie will be back in a second here. Or maybe we can launch, if you take a look at your agenda, you'll see where we're going from here. I've lost my agenda. This is, we're gonna spend the next 15 minutes. So just up until 7, then we'll take a break. And if you want to take a break, Melissa, you obviously can. This is sort of like a very rough out exercise in what will fit on the site that I like. When you also have to take into account parking. So we've got here, I'm going to turn this over quickly. I want a huge thanks to Tom Rogers and Mike Todd for putting these boards together, cutting out a million felt shapes that are drawn to scale. So you guys can have fun with felt like way back in the olden days. Remember that? Yeah. So that's tonight. We're going to divide you into 3 groups, and I'm going to posit 2, 2, and 2, and the mayor gets to go to whichever group he wants. And then you'll have floating support from the staff. And I'm going to turn it over now to Tom to explain something. If you look in your packets, there is behind page 4. Yeah, thing that looks like this. And he's going to walk through. This is, tells you what you got to play with here. I'll get that.
Okay, so what you've got before you is our prepared here is called our toolbox kit. I'll go through it really quickly, kind of what we've done. So what we did is it took all the various uses we've been talking about. And if you look on the left-hand side, these are the various facilities. Okay, I got it.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got different facilities. And what we've done is I picked different colors for each type of facility. So for the Boys and Girls Club, I've given one of 2 different types of boys clubs. Basically, they're the same size, but they're different shaped. So if you want a skinnier one or a square one, and then it tells you what dimensions we used in our estimate, the parking that's required, and the ratio we use. So that gives you some information, sort of background information. We did the same thing with community centers. That's purple. There's a smaller one like the Lake Stevens model, and there's some larger ones. We did those are 30,000 square feet. We did a performing arts center. We made that 12. There are 2 different sizes, there are shapes on those, or those
Full square.
okay.
So if you wanted a bigger one, like you want 800 seats, you might make it 2 like this, or if you would like to be creative, we've done more felt, you could cut things up.
Right, there was talk about going from 400. We were thinking 400 like the Kirkland, but I heard 800 last night, so we give you 2 in case you want to go a whole lot. Then we have the baseball fields. We have 3 different sizes, from the full-size baseball down to the adult softball to the little bit. And there's 2 of the full size and 3 each of the softball and little league. Soccer does the same color, but they're square, more square-like, so you should be able to tell the difference. You'll notice that I did write the name on it as well as how many parking spaces each one needs as well. So you don't have to keep looking at the sheet. That kind of that's a cheat sheet there. We also put concession stand and restrooms. They're not very big. They don't require any extra parking. For fun, we put down restaurant, which is a large one, maybe be 2 restaurants together, 5,500 square feet, and that's the dark tan. City Hall South and City Hall North, they're both the same size, but one's 2 stores, and one requires twice as much parking. So there was some talk early on, not recently, but about possibly a public facility or something like that.
So just that kind of building.
That type of a building, office building. We have a fire station. And that's the same size as our existing Mill Creek Fire Department station. And then the fun part is we provided lots and lots of parking. There are 2 different configurations of parking. One's the diagonal, which is narrower and longer, and then there's the perpendicular, which are shorter and a little squattier, and they are in sections of 20. They're marked off in 20s. There's some singular 20s and then blocks of 60. And so when you sort of figure out how much parking you need, you can just step some off if you don't have enough singulars. But that's sort of how you figure out how much parking lot would be.
So it says 50 parking spaces. You got to put 50 parking spaces somewhere. Or if you can think of a shared use, then you can get creative. But basically, this much needs 50 spaces to be used.
Quick question with parking. If we're talking about a larger building with subterranean parking, be possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Just make sure that you think about that when you present your plan. We can take notes of that. So anyways, hopefully you can use that table if you need to during the event, but I did try to make it as easy as possible. Again, the purpose of the exercise is not to figure out exactly which use would go where, but just is there enough room for desired uses? How much do they take? The templates are they're felt, cut to scale. We didn't get into the whole of like the edge and the landscaping next to the building and the pedestrian way to get from one to the other. So leave some green space in between them. You can't just put them all right next to each other. So think about that.
You want to make some trails. You can stick this on there.
The wetland buffers and the roadway buffers are shown in dashed lines on the. And you've seen this before, so you know where they are. What we've done is there is a little bit of flexibility with the buffers, with averaging and such. So you can encroach a little bit, but in general, just try to stay away from them. But we can get the details later. The Cook property.
Tell us when we submit our applications.
The Cook property wetland buffer, currently reasonable use is required for the whole site. We assume reasonable use with using the public works yard about 150 feet. So that's what's drawn on there as being usable in this exercise.
This is the stream. This is the
Yeah.
the wetland, and this is 300 feet from us here. There is nothing usable.
Wait, I just can't see it.
Dotted line is the wetland buffer. What Tom just said was reasonable use says you could probably make a case for using this.
Yeah, we gave that little wedge there as being for purposes of tonight's exercise.
Yes, between the 2 dotted lines, yeah.
Okay, thanks. The roadway buffer along the Mossler Highway is 50 feet. That is not flexible with our current code. So that is the landscape area that runs along all the uses on the arterials. And then
That's a no man's land.
You can't put anything in that on the highway. You can't put it close on the other, on North Creek Drive, but not.
Yeah, and the entrance would go through there, but that's generally a landscape area. And then your required parking that I wrote down on here is each one is standalone. But as was discussed last night, different times you can do shared parking. And these aren't exact numbers, so they're somewhat flexible. Just consider the parking standards as guidelines. You should be kind of close to that. If you're gonna go way off of it, sort of, I mean, you might even want more. Remember they were talking about the code for one of the performing arts and they didn't give them enough parking and they recommended something different. I used our existing code, which is 1 for every 3 seats, and they were recommending 1 for 2. So that could be a problem unless you're doing some shared parking. So that's kind of the ground rules. Mike and I, while you're talking and are working on this, we are available if you have questions. And this is when you kind of get up and, yes.
Just a quick question on the Cook property, in that small little area, what types of uses would we be able to?
Just put the gray ones there.
Our gate.
Well, anything that will fit it, and realize the further to the west you go, it slopes off pretty substantially, so the more expensive it gets. The further you go, the bigger the retaining wall gets.
But this part is fairly flat for like a building. It is not flat for a field, but it's fairly flat for a building. That was the yard, the Cook property on the yard. This is kind of where it tails off real.
Yeah, as you go to the west, and it drops off.
There was about a year ago, when we did our first presentation, we had the topography that had the fields kind of inlaid in there that we can look at. Do you still have those?
I don't have that map with me today. We do have surveys and.
I mean, just so we can get a look at it, just.
Yeah, I was gonna ask,
Maybe not
I know
tonight.
you created those for us. Yeah, I was wondering if they were archived anywhere.
Well, in a long, long time ago, we did an initial study to see if we could put ball fields in opposite Bremel area. And that's when the price came in 15 years ago at like $8 million, which is a big number back then. It's probably much higher number. And we can probably find those again somewhere. That sort of showed how much the topography was and how it's going to have to be leveled.
I think the point for tonight is to figure out what could fit.
Yeah.
And the orientation is not really so important, but I think we want you to graphically get a sense for there is not enough room for 3 soccer fields and 3 baseball fields. It just won't fit. So that's what we want you to kind of think about tonight. And don't worry about the fact that it's lumpy.
That's what you and Tom are supposed to tell us.
Yeah, isn't that your job?
It won't fit, Vaughn.
Sitting here behind the plexiglass.
We're telling you right here.
Experiential learning.
Yes, this is, yeah, there you go.
So, if you have a violent opposition who you've been paired with, you can work it out amongst yourselves, but otherwise we're saying 2. Let's have a area all together, mayor, forward. And we are gonna take pictures of this. When you're done, you'll have 5 minutes to present what you come up with. And then recorders.
Yes.
Just so you know, there will, at the request of the city attorney, there are gonna be tape recorders at every table, so find your P's and Q's and,
So Mayor, I just wanted to just quickly repeat, what everyone will notice at each of their workspaces is a recorder. That audio recorder is on in order for us to comply with the direction we received from our city attorney. Okay.
These
So
are
we're
perfect
gonna-
requests.
we're gonna-
25 minutes.
25 minutes. Drives on one side, so we can. I'm sorry. You check right out. So it's just automatic. So the tab goes down to the road. Okay. So perpendicular to the street. Perpendicular to the other. Diagonal versus. And these are diagonal. And then what's that way? You said those 20s are. Those are actually coming to the street. Ones are blocked. Oh, yeah, perpendicular. Yes, okay, these are actually, these are perpendicular that match. Okay, I get it.
Sorry. This is your manager, Freedom Fields.
City manager?
That's 250.
So there's.
250. It's the built side.
No.
Yeah, so usually.
See, these two are being. What are those again?
That is a new.
Buildings. Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah, I apologize for that abbreviation. Sure. So we just had a few days.
Yeah.
Doing soccer. Thank you.
So that's still be. I want to have that conversation.
So, yeah. So I
Start
have a
factoring in.
Okay,
Well, you know what?
There's one of those here, there's the entrance right down here.
Yeah.
To that like side.
All right, no, we'll do this. We'll do this. I'll get it.
Don't worry about it right now. It makes it way too hard.
And then this is the ravine.
Yeah.
That's all flat. Yeah. Down the road.
Yeah, that's the road.
Oh.
So what's this up here?
This is like, it's not ours.
This is the other one we have.
I think we have part of the.
Where is
Yeah, that's the other thing. Maybe
It's like,
This.
yeah,
Here.
you ever six, you ever go to, you remember six
Yeah.
stadium, you ever go to Greenwood?
No, but.
I went to Greenwood once.
Oh, we have two different sizes. See, we get that one.
If I remember correctly. Yeah.
So these are, so I learned a couple of things just my meeting last week.
I think it's
I said, we look at that student interchange at some, just like this here, retrofit and the lines change and move up and down. Across the baseball for everything. So anything baseball, it's not like.
Yeah, that's the little creek.
So if we wanted to go like this, what do we have to do?
Where's there a setback here?
This is, well, you can't, you go in front of it. Yeah. it's out. You have to go back. You have to sort of make sure.
But this is the setback
You're
here.
gonna stand aside. You
I'm just saying, this is not, you can't go here, you just gotta adjust.
Right, yeah, it's, you can average. It's, you go, if you go to here, it's push out here. So just like I was for about 20,000. So, but I want you to get over 30. Don't worry about it so much. Kind of go with it because there's some other things that are now too.
The footprint is still
But
the same.
But I like those, like this. Sure, but I like you did. You save that whole frontage is very expensive. That's hugely valuable.
That's what I think.
I like what you did, make this here. Something in there.
It's not where the balls are gonna go.
That's even a teacher
They
from
need to
there.
be somewhere.
You gotta figure out.
We're not each doing
We could put some in there.
Right.
Or you know, what you could do, you could sell that thing. What's the input of these things again?
Oh, the community center.
That's the community center.
Many things are 20,000. This is 20,000, that's 20,000. We have different colors. We'll talk about them later.
Yeah.
But this is a 20,000.
Oh,
And so
yes.
Oh, this is the community center. Yep. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
It's a small community center. This is the one like.
If you were to do it, it would be
The same.
we would
sort of
try to make the same
Hey, can you
scale.
not play soccer on
On
the
five
weekend?
27, you can.
That's why what he's saying is correct. So occasionally we do overlap.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
It's about the concession.
Yeah, well, how
Right,
it's
that's
just,
what we're doing.
so it's like.
Community center
That's checking your scale.
with your.
Okay, well, yeah, that's about it. It wasn't easy.
Mike did that, so,
You know what the-
Boys and Girls Club,
Well,
understanding structures.
Wanted it.
And what did that mean?
And I'm trying to just like, yeah, so let's just pick.
Right, yeah. So it's just configuration differences.
In case you got the size.
Well, we might want to accommodate.
All fields.
I would say it's just my guess to about.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard it was readable.
I should take a picture.
It's kind of like.
What do we do?
That's
So we can remember what we read.
And then like some type of capacity between them,
Right,
which
right.
may be
Possibly even like a
integrated.
bridge.
Now we're gonna do another.
But it would have been in the middle and then the other. way.
I had a question.
So
So we'll
I can actually-
Just double click, because both 20,000. Yep. It's several basketballs. So we just said, remember they told us 20,000 square feet, so this one's square and this one's. This is 200 by 100.
Right up.
So,
I presume that's the
Yeah, I bet they're.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah, exactly. Because you would want it to wind up to wherever the building is, so it's not way off from. That's kind of a flow.
So one code is you're not necessarily going to be cumulatively all.
That's what I was.
Train us up.
That's what I was.
We just gotta make sure there's a hundred in this somehow. But they also use hundreds that also-
Well, maybe that is really.
The sense is the
Right.
parking.
Where's the strip for open space, like for, to put like a park around there? For the yard.
Right. It's like, well, the footprint would be like that, really you need to have this much additional space.
Really additional things, right? Since they don't typically.
I was thinking of
performing arts, I'm sure
open
that
space.
in a negotiation, I'm sure that that's correct.
Engineers.
Yeah.
and staff.
Which I think
That's a good baseball field.
it was really interesting.
Also though,
with a community center.
if you're saying,
Now let's do.
I'm not saying this is what I want to do, but I want to do
Look at it.
some of this. over there.
So here's the performing arts center.
Well, 50 parking spaces and that's seating up here.
Right.
Well, they said half your seats.
I was thinking four.
That's only two.
So we want.
Even like-
That's Kirk. That's 16. He's only got 3
Yeah, right.
Mistakes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
That means just
Still
about.
Yeah, he wants to.
It's not a fancy building.
I'm just saying.
So you
It's
can-
not about. I like to.
I think 5 to 6 seats.
If we're gonna do it. One is the.
Let's just say 1.5.
I was just curious.
I'm gonna go with that. 6 seats. I like that.
I mean.
And
like-
I like to.
It's nice to get together.
Yeah, I do too. Well, I see.
Like large.
What's the
structure that accommodates both.
The theater and parking would be in this community center. Something like 1,600 and all this parking between the ways.
The parking right off the road.
I mean, 120.
That's 140.
So.
240, that's perfect.
Well, we can't be so fancy.
That's good.
You bet. You want to do it.
And I think that's your goal.
Because I think that's.
Or whatever.
Yeah. Yes. So we get more enough.
I mean, we are never done a project. Wow, we've really done way too much parking.
Never.
I agree on that. I'm on board. It serves all the needs. So over different buildings.
Yeah, the restaurant.
It's a restaurant. I like that idea.
Yeah. I do too. I don't know how we do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Give them a and then they come in. Franchisee or somebody. I think sports cards.
I just don't know, how do they do?
Oh, there isn't.
When
When
there's
there's
no
no
shows.
But this is primary, but when this is going on. This right here. We put it over there.
Do we need to find more parking?
We put it over there. I think that's right. That is primo.
Yeah, this should be.
That was over there.
What did you say, Houston Trail?
Yes. I would vote that whole strip, we could make a fortune out of it. Yeah. Because that's a
So we
destination.
can yard for trails?
I think we could have development. On the shit out of that thing. On 527. Extending on.
So where we can put the
This.
Yeah.
This becomes a trail or some like. We're gonna make a strip. Oh, he's going to town. Mark got onto it, man. You gotta get it. Trails.
I really like that idea.
It's a little tiny. That's gonna be a strip mall. Yeah, let's just park it.
They can sort of canal, they, connect the Great Lakes.
Into those,
So that's good to know.
Okay, so that's the parking garage. Parking lot.
Yeah, we gotta figure out 100.
So you guys are 20, 40, 60.
And you've got
40, 60, 80, 100 parking spots. There's got a parking structure.
Or you put 20 in there.
Well, does that fall within reasonable
Yeah,
use?
can we get double?
Over there.
Double
Where you,
story?
over here.
Yeah, right
Yeah,
there.
we were looking at doing
Yeah, same.
That's
Right. But you put
That
the
feels like it would be.
revenue generated.
Small.
Doable, and even outside of your.
Yeah, you could put it right there.
That's right.
So that's what I was gonna generate. To support all this.
Do we just sell it and use the money? What's this?
But double stacking
We
in
don't
like.
know.
Well, yeah, so if you manage to strike
with,
Okay,
well, that would be.
I mean, we'll put it on there.
So this would be our open space.
What they would do for it if you're zoned for multifamily,
What's that?
if you're zoned for multifamily.
Oh,
Okay, I'm not thinking-
well, I think even also.
Creative.
What about the retail
Oh,
below?
Oh,
We were going restaurant.
Yeah.
Restaurant bars. What do you think? What is it?
I know.
Yes.
I like it. I like this.
And that's a small portion.
That's what we said. It's all for one hour, third ball.
We can take some of the parts and bring it to 50%.
Just like.
Yeah, that's-
I like this one. He's got some ideas to it.
We do, and I see that as.
We need another restroom. Well, what I like is we got space right there.
They're pretty small.
This could bring it. Two or three. Let's call this a restroom. I don't know. How much? What is this?
Oh, we
That's true. Yeah, that would be our open space to the kids structure. It's right there in the park.
Is this parking there?
That's the-
I didn't give you a.
No, it's all right. We figured it out.
Yes.
Yes.
So that's a way. Yeah, there's, there's, purpose kids off the box. Yeah, we want to know what it is.
No, you're good. Yeah. And then the department stuff. I just.
Did you want
Yes, it's like throwing around.
Vince, so you don't, you want to say playground? Where the playground?
Kind of like Berry Farm down there.
Yeah, we don't.
Apartment complex that overlooks that big. It's actually possible.
Yeah, how much?
I didn't have
Kids play, do whatever here. It's on the field. Vice versa.
There is a need for
Performing arts. Well, that's creative.
It is pretty, I like this. You got everything. Spots. We were landlords.
Right.
And nobody has said the city.
Yeah.
But I don't want to go. I want them to go.
That can't. Stealing our stuff.
Well, no, that's. There
I like it for us, like, yeah, there's a revenue source, but I don't like it as a tax. I don't want government grabbing it.
You know what?
Yeah. Well, no, you're right.
No, we don't, this is.
We're doing 500 seats.
This is not that. We overlap to show.
We went to 500 seats.
250 max, maybe close.
Now, if community center. So the community center is running by itself. They need 150 seats. Have space.
So what do you Is this enough?
It's 280.
It's around the 500. To see how it interchanges. The community center would not run the same time. So they would share this parking lot.
So we can. Then we could like put also that small theater in there. In the small. They could, because we were saying that we could.
Multi-purpose.
Yes, we could say that we could
Yeah, we did the whiteboard, the rectangle. Kind of matches our soccer field.
You know, if you're gonna put up our.
We're developing something. I was thinking that you want to have this is the drive up here. And you can see this parking lot and you can see the performance center and the community center right up here.
We don't have a land.
Right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but then we have to connect everything back. Yeah, because it's gonna tilt up. Yeah, we don't know.
If you're not using these, the thing I liked about this meeting is surrounded by greenery. You could.
I believe we facilitated
enough. Yeah, you got it around all the way. You know, Lisa has this amphitheater, this is the majority of the time of the year you can't use it. Watch it stay. Well, 3 points. You can have a performance space and an amphitheater. That's kind of cool. Yeah. That's one thing that you got to. I kind of like.
Toilet, the idea of sort of a private partnership over here, where business or commercial. I like that. These are high, these.
Yeah, this is right. This is the drive up you might see.
That's right on this.
This thing's gonna have multi-purpose.
Yeah, that is.
You can move.
Like this and shove it around.
We can do this. Put parking back here. Like this.
I think we just did one. Yeah.
And there's already one here. And there's already one here.
And you get that. You make it here, right?
Yeah, so there's already.
You
one
get this huge
there.
parking lot over here. And then this has the frontage. That's kind of cool. Look at this. You got this building out here on the road. You've got this restaurant right by this field.
Let's make a little parking.
You know what I was in San Francisco.
Yeah, you're right.
We went hiking,
Yeah.
and along the end of the hiking, they had.
Maybe the cheese
along
cake.
the-
You can put the
like, along the
restaurants
end,
there.
coming down. That was off to the side there.
So part of the water.
Right. And
Well,
so
so it's like you took like a 5 minutes.
You guys look like you're.
We love this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so it goes along there, right?
You
breathe on some.
Are you okay with showing this one?
Yeah.
I like this. I'm excited about this one.
I mean, just.
Right.
We got,
I think we got everything.
we got all this part right here. But it doesn't.
Well, they have.
Tennis.
Yeah. They-
Oh, that we have. I like it better.
I think we can just do things like that.
Okay, we got.
I mean, I.
Well, no, I think
Well, yeah, a little bit of. Animated package. It's not that much. We did,
Yeah.
It's helping me.
That's quite a bit of part, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually, if you want to go in here, they park here.
It could be subterranean.
Right here, they park here.
Yeah, right. Every step of it is not, it's concrete.
And by the way, I also. Because of all this.
Well, here, that's the big. Yeah, and. That's the thing.
I know we're awesome.
I like that. Here. Put this guy back here. Leave this guy up here. I like that.
Yeah,
Because this thing is parking.
right, that's what I'm saying. We're never, never, like, oh, God, we got so much parking. That's never-
This is also this routine right here.
Yeah.
So this would be like a map.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas our nature trail for
I think everybody else here.
There's like a reservoir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used to live.
Oh, okay.
Ooh, you guys are tabulating down to the points. Fortunately, my town home went to. But I shop a lot in Mill Creek, so I'm still very close by.
Easier to work with.
Now we're really. So.
That's what we were thinking, that these are some interconnected uses. You need it for the ball fields.
And I'm sorry, where you push this?
Oh, disc golf.
Okay.
Disc golf.
Just a hole. 1, 2, 3.
So is there a reason?
There isn't, 9 would be preferable.
But somebody already took our pants. So we need to definitely protect those. Oh, no, and clear pants.
Thank you.
Definitely need to protect those wetlands.
Site layout.
Provides additional to this, which is. It's not representing a full 800.
Yeah, we don't want to right here.
So it's a 500.
One is 4, 1 is 2 is 8, but we're trying to represent about 5.
Yeah. That'll be the most cost.
And we did a little soccer field, and we paid for it.
Now you don't.
You haven't seen this yet. This is pretty creative.
You don't have any guys.
Oh.
We are.
No, you have one.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'll set it. Well, they have this right here. What restaurant?
Yeah, I would use them.
This one, is that a restaurant?
Okay, well, that's.
Okay.
Okay, which team wants to present first? You should be presenting from up here.
Oh, Vince wants to present first.
Vince's team wants to present first. Okay, we're gonna put your board up here. on the
Facility.
knees on
Barb,
there. Everybody got
We did it, Barb. We found a restaurant.
We're gonna name it after you.
A lot of people get bridges.
Well, you're gonna have to pay for it.
All right.
Naming rights.
So, Team A here, now we want to give you 5 minutes here to present to the key uses, why you chose those, what challenges you had in putting this together, and unresolved issues or aha moments.
So no unresolved issues, we've solved it. So one of the necessary components of being competitive for regional fields is to have the necessary number. We sometimes forget that we don't factor that these fields are interchangeable from soccer, especially given the turf that we're using, soccer, softball. You can put literally 3 separate baseball fields here, 3 separate soccer field or lacrosse fields as well, and accommodate the parking neatly here in the Cook property. Put a boys and girls club over there with a community room as well. Over here between the wetland buffers, placing the parking in between the older part of the field, putting a play structure in the middle, restroom in the middle, all centralized. Parents can watch their kids. Everybody's good. Walking trail all the way around, all the way up along 527.
And I'd say like one thing, because this way we can incorporate the ball fields for that vision to try and with the ball fields and expand on that. And we can also fit a broader vision and be able to help take care of more people and to use more people by having the boys and girls club, considering that it would have one that's going to have more community space added in there. And would possibly be able to fit a community center theater in there as well. And so that way we can manage to fit both of those and we can fit that in there and have the walking trails and the extra ball fields.
I think centralizing the parking as well in different corners like this really isn't, you don't have cars driving all around. They're going to be in one centralized area really between the main road here and here.
And we didn't have any problem.
Awesome. All right, that was great. Who wants to go next? All right, let's bring, do we have this space for all 3?
Yeah, we'll just do that. We'll leave it for now and we'll switch back to it.
Okay.
Sure, I'll start. So we matched up the size of Freedom Field, which is the adult softball size, so that we can get this trifecta of fields in here, multi-use the same that Freedom Field has with both soccer and baseball in there. There's concession stands here. Opposite that, we have concession stands and restrooms so that each has its necessary components there. We decided to go crazy in terms of buildings with both the Boys and Girls Club and the Performing Arts Community Center aspect there. So it facilitates all the needs of the community and everything. A lot of parking here. We did double decker parking structure. So it's 400 or 240 spots, 240 spots here, and then spots around the Boys and Girls Club. With the Performing Arts Center, we have spots for disabled individuals, veterans, things of that nature. The way the land is right now, it kind of warrants itself for a drive-through drop-off lane. Up there, these little thumbtacks, disc golf, gotta have a 9. And in terms of pathways, we're kind of cutting across here with a bridge because there is a ravine that goes in the middle. So it fully connects pathways. Anything like that?
Any surprises when you were doing it?
That more could fit in here than we thought, I guess would be a surprise.
So you got structured parking on Cook?
Right.
Okay.
It's a homeless shelter, by the way.
Well,
That's what it ends up becoming.
Double decker.
Awesome.
all right.
And we're trying to use all the hardware we have. Locally hard. I'll let you go first. Want to lead it off?
So we put a soccer field here. Depending on the need, we could do the baseball field soccer combo matching this. We put parking in, that we recognize that this parking already fills up. We're trying to enhance some of that. We got lots of parking. None of the projects we've had, including Town Center, nobody's ever said, wow, we got way too much parking. Oh my gosh, they've wasted all these spots on parking. So we tried to really aggressively address parking. We got a performing arts center next to a community center, either one building or two buildings, however you want to do it. We got a little restaurant here. And then we're going to try and defer some of the costs to doing this rather ambitious project by doing something with the existing church project that would be with the free market. So in our little vision was this was a restaurant with parking. This could be maybe a bar, restaurant, I don't know, whatever the market demands, but some sort of a commercial coffee shop, I don't know. But try and do something with that in a commercial. It's right on the Bothell River Highway, also has parking, close to all this stuff.
And we don't know all the legalities, but the thought was, this is the most valuable frontage in the world right now, 527. So what if we took this little chunk, instead of putting one of our facilities there, we develop it with a developer, and maybe could we co-develop with them where instead of selling them the land, we enter into a lease agreement where we split the lease revenues. This becomes a revenue stream for the properties. The revenue stream from the, I don't know if it's legal or not, but the revenue stream would help to support operating costs for some of these public facilities. But we figured these are destinations back here. They don't need the frontage, the theater, the community center. And also the restaurant here, we kind of like the idea of adding the restaurant. They could serve both masters when there's shows going on, when there's events going on in the fields. A small slab that we could be converted to maybe a more franchise type restaurant operation. But this was the one we were most interested in.
And trying to get out of the box. I mean, even could we work a deal where you build us this building for you and you get that, and you build us this building for us and we get this?
That's an option.
Just trying to
That's good. Yeah, good point.
be out of the
Developers will
box.
do a lot to get a chunk of land at 527.
So that's what we were trying to address.
Awesome.
I like it.
That for a competent salesman, huh?
Wow, what do you guys think? Was it fun?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't want to do it, but it was actually a lot of fun. Like,
Was anything particularly hard or annoying? Like, oh crap, parking. Or no? You guys
No,
all
the
did
numbers
park.
kind of bear it out, right?
Locked myself under the nail with the pen.
So now
The eye opener is there's a lot of options. This
Yeah.
is actually
There's more
really
land we
large.
found, yeah. There's a lot of
property.
options. It's not one thing or the other.
Okay.
And everybody felt that way.
I like that
Yeah.
aspect. That it's
You
not
guys
just-
all smashed in almost some of almost every single use.
We can just let.
Let's do everything.
Let's do it.
Well, I mean, they all have potential for unique partnerships too as well, right? So
Yeah, I also, each of these plans, I think has a great opportunity for phasing. That's part of it, that we can develop each of these in some fashion through different parts of it, and as we get funding, as we find partners that can do a portion of it, something like that. So, and even Councilmember Bond and Councilmember Steckler's plan included a trade-off in that way.
Unless you guys want, Mike, we should talk about the numbers here. Mike did the
Yeah.
math because you're not gonna.
Well, so I threw out the Russian judge. And it's just, I don't know if the numbers say a lot, but that's what the numbers were averaged from you guys. So that was your raw numbers. Some people use 135 more than others, like 145. But whatever you put down is what I use. So I'll hold that. So Karen can interpret.
Well, let's see, here. Lots of things above 4, with 5 being the top of the pile. So highest rating on the deck here is 4.7, and that went to community center community center, community center. Lowest ratings on the board are spread around. Performing Arts Center, Performing Arts Center, and Natural Lands over here. 149. Yeah, we can total and average the bottom and see how it goes across. But that's, yeah, this one's got, here's the 4.
Boys and Girls
Boys and
Club,
Girls Club.
enhance, not compete. Second one,
Bingo, bingo, that's the high score. My apologies. Yes, that's the high score. Enhance and not compete. Well, we'll do the math at the bottom. We'll give you an average on these, but that's pretty, I think that's pretty interesting.
Community center seems the highest.
I think so.
imagine a hybrid of the Boys and Girls Club and the community center.
So you think about what you did is you kind of, real quick gut, spent 5 minutes after thinking about this for a couple of days. Really quickly, you put down numbers, those boxes. That was your gut impression. If we took everybody's gut impression and stuck it together and averaged it, yeah, we could take one more average. I wouldn't say that's really good data anymore. There's too many decimal points here, but it does, it kind of gives you guys a sense of the temperature of you collectively at this moment in time with the stuff you heard last night and the stuff you were hearing today. So
I didn't like number 2, primarily designed to be used by broadband. That's 1. And then draw
Yes.
regional users. That's 2. I mean, I would have separated those out.
I
You
had
guys
disclaimers on
matched it.
2 of mine.
You said primarily we want it for this, but secondarily we want it for that. That was one principle. That's why it's smashed together there, but it does make it awkward.
Yeah,
You're
I
saying
had
you
2 that I
struggled
gave
with
a
your-
number.
Yeah,
that each
I
one, but
I rated some of these different in that, a this for that one, but a this in this category.
yeah,
That's a good point.
Drawing
another
of regional
product is
users
later
is
on.
very different. for
It's
some
very,
of
yeah,
these.
it's very different than using a broad range.
For instance, natural lands and trails is not drawing regional users by, sort of by definition.
Yeah.
But ball fields does,
Yeah.
because they could have people coming, if you were doing tournaments, you might have people coming from Federal Way or Soldier or something.
But they don't really reach a broad range of demographics.
Right,
Correct,
So it's
which
kind
is
of
why I
conflict.
wrote disclaimers on 2 on a couple of them.
Yeah.
Interesting. If you do polls,
The bullets
recreational
worked on
polls,
that they have
spread
on there.
anywhere on the planet,
it's fine.
open space and trails always comes out on top.
I mean, it's like a pro and a con pretty much for everything, right?
It's interesting. Okay,
For me, I skip the natural lands and trails. I mean, that's sort of the, if we don't come up with anything better, we can
That's
default to that.
He was the Russian judge, so now I know.
We've been doing the natural lands and trails. That's what we've been.
Yeah, we got that down.
Now, we've been doing that.
We
for
got
years
some
now.
open space for that.
all right, you guys have all earned a quick break if you haven't taken one already, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll do the last exercise, which will involve some dots, but not very much. All right. Dots.
Dot, dot, dot.
No candy.
More useful than.
You guys were setting me up. But then after we started doing it, they just said, I see the value in it.
Yeah, and then we'll just, run it in the top of the different color. And we'll, yeah, that's.
They got one more. You guys can start talking. Go back up the film. Why don't you take the felt out of the way? You take the felt out of the way. Start picking up that stuff. I gotta use some numbers here for him. I'm not gonna use my head.
One of these. For this.
Good.
So it's just.
God, I have to say, no, I took a lot of weight behind your proposal.
Yeah, we're down.
Oh, the weight behind the proposal. Yeah. We brought the heavyweights down.
I think we got it. Thanks. Appreciate it.
The two of us walked down there going, "What's that? We don't need to know about doing
Oh, wait,
this."
this one's the return. That's what-
Sometimes day rents is a plus.
Yeah, your structured parking is a little expensive, but I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I just hope there's not peat under there.
We're gonna have sunken structured parking.
Dig it down.
We get 2 layers, it's just driving on the top floor.
It'll start as above ground.
Do I walk something?
Yeah.
Food guys there for it.
Yeah, actually, Naomi kindly ordered me a dinner, so I've been inhaling some of my here and there. So.
I was, Adam had it right on us.
Or, but, who's obviously front of our way. Has to be
Do you remember the camera and the recorder is still on? So,
kind of getting wispy there, but slow down the weight loss.
The dots. that I have.
Mike, you were the dots.
No, it's off.
Probably could be they are. It's not be healthy. Yeah, it's actually big. You want me to pour you some? It's actually good. Oh, like. Here? Oh, I'm going to do this. Oh, I thought.
Actually,
I'm not big. Yeah. That is cool.
Really, I do think we need to class on house. He said, something like, your drink is.
I do. I got really, so it's here, it's very nice.
Rick McGray.
I like art. I like, I really like the technical. You guys want to see the map? You ready to rejoin here?
Okay, so we've done this more high accuracy because this is now really, this is really not really balancing our high accuracy. This is 4.813 repeating. So anybody really wants to know, that's exactly the number. 4.1 was 3.9, 376, 373, 316.
Do you want to just give us a ranking?
That is. You can't count.
Top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll type this up and get it to you as part of the project.
No, wait, you did that wrong. Performance is 3.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Was that,
5.
I'm sorry, is that 3.76 or 3.26? 26, I'm sorry. I left
Yeah,
seven.
two on there. Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm trying to catch.
but again,
I saw
this
this.
is too many digits of resolution for the amount of accuracy.
Yeah, it's not like this is that deal. Okay, so we wanted to spend the last bit of time together talking about what you guys think would be the most helpful things to do moving forward. Because we have now pretty much moved through the entire calendar and then some of tasks that we identified for ourselves for this first phase. I mean, tonight's exercise and the facility study and the facilities panel, none of those were on the initial work plan. We added those. The thing that was on the initial work plan that we haven't done is the needs assessment, because when we're looking at the entire universe, that's darn expensive needs assessment. So we thought that we would try to get a little more focused before we came back and tried to price that out. So based on what you heard tonight, is there anything that you could think of as a next step that you're particularly interested in?
I would say identifying funding sources and partners.
For each site.
Yes. Well, maybe we can. I mean, the open spaces, I don't think we need to really go too crazy on that. We know what park construction costs. And there are monies put aside to read for that, so.
Other thoughts about what you might want to do next? I mean, we have a retreat in September that's going to look at what would you like to include in your budget of activity for funding your budget for next year. So this is sort of the pre-discussion to that brainstorming. And we'll do it for real in September, but just what are some of the things you think we need to do to move forward?
You know, I'm looking at your chart over there.
This one?
Yeah, and you know, it's interesting, all the different topics that we have. There are things like ball fields, green spaces, even the Boys and Girls Club. Those are not real revenue concerns for us because Boys and Girls Club is going to pay for the whole thing. The other ones are really a cost issue. We are a total one. The one we really don't know is the community center and the performing arts center. And so when we talk about funding sources and partners, if we could focus on those two and come back in September and say, look, let's do some research. What resources are available to us to maybe partners, consultants that we could bring in to help with funding, finding private funds, finding the grants, finding the kind of funding that we would need, so that what responsibility will fall back on us in the city? Because I think that would make everyone up here a little bit more comfortable knowing if we go in that direction, how the heck are we going to pay for it? Because that's a concern I think I hear.
Okay. Other thoughts about what you think seems logical in your head and something that might be a next step here as we move forward?
Terminate phasing. Essentially, which portions you might work first.
Some of the like bonds or a source of revenue for us, if we were just gonna say, come up with $10 million to put towards this, what would be the path for us to have that? Obviously, we don't have it in the general fund. We have historically not borrowed much, so we are in good shape there. Should we want to go down that path, if we saw some merit in that? But kind of a snapshot of this is an option. 10 million, 20 million.
I'm gonna speak to the elephant in the room. At some point, we need to decide on a vision. And then look at revenue sources and how to make that vision come into play, as opposed to spending all the hours researching every single one.
Narrow our focus, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think we keep kicking the can, that we're not gonna pick. And we're leaving everything on the table, and at some point, we've got to start to narrow it in, and get something.
And you know, dream big, right?
Yes.
As I said something along those lines.
Yes.
Don't pick the vision that is really truly your vision before you limit yourself by saying, "Ooh, it's expensive." Yeah, so was college, but we did it anyway, right? So
Yeah, and then look at the funding and see if it's possible, or if we need.
everything is possible if you guys are really committed. So it's a matter of deciding what's most important to you as a community, as a council. Is there more? Is there community? Well, I'll just stop there. Is there any other ideas at this point? I was thinking community input that seems logical next, or anything else.
I'm wondering how realistic the plans were that we came up with, and I would be interested to know what, I don't think it would be a huge investment, a few $1,000s to have a planner take those concepts and put together a rendering. And a little more realism to see how realistic we were on our assumptions of what we could put on the site, so we can, instead of seeing felt on a paper, see a planner's rendering of what it conceptually might look like.
Yeah.
So we can start to visualize to see if that is the vision that we have.
I think that would be incredibly helpful. With that was sort of the second phase thing, and I think that you're right on.
Yeah, because I think the other thing for me, with picking up on Benjamin's point, is that's one thing that came out of this is there's clear lines delineated in my mind of how to phase this, and I think we need to be thinking about if we come to agreement on the potential uses and where they might go, and then adjust the boundaries to create parcels so that we can phase things over time, and maybe we tackle parking on Cook to provide overflow for the ball field now, and we have a parcel that's the community center or whatever. But so I think those are the two steps in my mind. I'd like to conceptualize this a little more to see if we were really realistic, because I think I've heard everyone say we're surprised by what we were able to get on the site. But I think we need a little reality check with the professional planners to see if we're dreaming or if there's some realism there with our codes.
I think that's great. Now you said there was 2 ideas. Did I miss one? It's a truth out with 3 planning boards.
Oh, and the boundary line, the phasing.
Oh, phasing, got it.
So I think that was what I saw, because I spent a few minutes with each group, and it seemed like as I looked at each one, you could kind of split it into 4 parcels. You've got one on Cook, and then you kind of had 2 or 3 on the big chunk of property that could be the separate phase lines, not deciding what goes in each phase.
You know, a phase that, the next step that I would like to take is we're starting to narrow down into some specific opportunities here, which the first time we went out and talked to the citizens, we didn't have that. We're kind of throwing everything up against, what do you like, what do you want, if we went back, rather than us making a decision here and back, what if we went back and did a survey, but this time went back to the citizens, and I recommend that the survey be a little bit different this time, that be specific to the residents, that we mail it out. We go to everybody. So we make sure we get a resident sample, that it doesn't come all from just the seniors or all just from the young people, or that it's a representative sample of the citizens of Mill Creek and their reactions to these ideas, because we may on this council say we like this thing, and sure would make me feel better if I knew that we asked the citizens about these 4 options and we told them what they were. And we asked them to respond to which one would they like to see, what would they feel most supportive of us pursuing. I think that would help a lot of the city council up here take a decision out of just our thoughts of what's right, but to know what our citizens want. But I want it to be a representative sample. It has to be different. It can't be a random. It has to be clearly in relationship to the population.
I don't devil's advocate on that, going back to my comment about the community. I'm not sure who you pull. Where do you draw the line? Do you draw the line at city residents? And if you don't draw it at the city residents, if this is a community project, because we did that with the survey, am I correct? It wasn't limited to the residents. And so that's my concern with talking about a survey of citizens, is I'm not sure where you draw that line, if who you're going to survey and not survey.
There is a risk to that. You're right. We about 18% of the survey respondents from the other survey were outside of the city limits, 72% within the city limits. But when we're just talking about spending city funds, I think at least if I knew I had a representative sample of the city of Mill Creek, those citizens, I feel more comfortable with that. You're right. It'd be great if we could include people outside of the city and include the community. I just don't know where you would draw the line of that. How far do you go out?
I don't disagree with the whole notion of maybe polling some folks again, but I kind of think we've done that already, and now it's back on our doorstep. So when we're talking next steps, it's what is the council's vision, where we're at, how we're going to fund it. We've taken the public input. The reason we are at the stage where we're looking at buildings and art centers and all these things is because of the input. And if we're trying to be a regional player, simply polling your own citizens that have already given you a conclusion already, I don't think it would be very helpful. It's just a redundant step.
Okay, so more discussion there. Any other thoughts about things you think we might be doing next or want to do next? These are all good. This will keep us busy for a while, not to worry. And we'll have plenty to talk about from this at the next retreat, which we hope will be in September. So before I let you leave with dots, this was going to be actually for blue dots, but I think you guys had such a good time with the plans. There may not be. Are there any phasing or partnering ideas you just want to sort of get on the board here, just half a concept. And then the blue dots would just, for me, I like that idea. So I'm just, in case there's something that's still rambling around in your head, like we should start with the Boys and Girls Club and then build from that. Or it's got to be fields as the foundation. Or we should go talk to the school district and get them engaged in the EAC discussion. If there's any sort of thoughts that are going around in your mind about how we might proceed or what might be some keys to success here, I thought I would try to capture some of those and then you guys could respond to those as part of the thoughts. So is there anything you've been thinking about in terms of phasing or partnering that you just want to get out there and we'll just make sure you don't lose the brain cells?
I think partnering with Boys and Girls Club, considering the things they said, should be one of the options.
Should be what?
Should be one of the options for us to.
Yeah, and I'd also like to talk with them more in depth about their flexibility in terms of performing arts aspects, civic center type things, and how much use the city will get at.
Okay.
And they had mentioned a certain site size that they had used in the past. I believe that included things like sports fields. And so if we were to implement our own sports fields, I imagine they would be able to make use of those. And even if there was, say, a facility that was theirs, and then we allow use.
So like how they would approach this site, given what they said about how much field space they need, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
If they looked at this site and said, we totally love this site, we totally want to do this, but by the way, we need the whole darn thing. And you really don't have anything for anything else.
Yeah, that would be important.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Performing arts, ball fields, queries about needs, anything?
I know Councilman Cavalier disagrees with me, but I really strongly believe that the survey that we did before was not representative from the citizens because it was a respondent survey, which means that people chose to respond.
That's right.
And it was, and we don't have demographic data, so we don't even know if they're all young or all old or anything. So I'm very concerned, and I think it would motivate us to, at this stage, get some input from our community. And if I say citizens, somebody is concerned, I don't see a problem with getting, I think it would be so motivating and so, that's the right word, it would help give us some direction to know, I'd like to know what our citizens want, rather than what we want, because there are things like Boys and Girls Club is such an easy, I mean, if I wanted the right approach, Boys and Girls Club is the most, risk-free solution, and probably the riskiest one is probably a performing arts center, because it's a lot of something none of us have any information on. But is that something our citizens want? Maybe they don't want it. That helps. That helps to say, okay, they don't want it. I'm hearing they do, and that's all. I'm not hearing people on my Facebook talking about anything else. So I'd like to hear from the citizens. Love that.
There's also timing associated with when you go back and ask the surveys, because if you ask about uses without resource constraints, you may get a very different answer. Like, so if you were at the point where saying, okay, we narrow this down, it's these three things. We can do this for X amount of city revenue and this X Z for Y amount of city revenue. So you may get a difference. I want to go on a world cruise, but when you tell me it cost me $70,000, I don't want to go. So I think that, and we don't have the data yet. And I will confess, I think that getting the vision a little clearer and then truthing out some of these options, that seems to be a pretty important thing to do before we go back to the community. But I don't disagree that that may not be a really important thing to do at some point. I'm not sure we know enough now to do it.
One of the things that, excuse me, that I was surprised at myself a little bit, and I took from really the folks in the room here, is that everybody is now open to the freestanding structure. So we've evolved from the just ball fields to just apartments or whatever. into being open. But how do we, I think that probably the biggest question is, how do we marry those ideas together to that one type of freestanding structure that accommodates all the needs that we're talking about here, right? So no one's going to be sold on everybody's one idea of just the Boys and Girls Club, give them the property, let them run with it. No one wants doing X, Y, Z. So I think it makes more sense to figure out how we accommodate maybe something in one building, and to Benjamin's point, the phasing aspect of that, and maybe working around it. I've never done a project this size before, so I'm open to either one.
So I like community input, but I'm worried about it. Like, I mean, depending on how the survey goes, if the Frisbee golf people rally, then all we're gonna hear is 90% of the people surveyed wanted a Frisbee golf field. But, and I want to hear from the citizens of Mill Creek. Part of the reason we're up here is because we're given a chance to lead and make decisions. But this is a big one. And like you used on the cruise, like we could fund it if everybody in the city said, we want a performing arts center, community center, and we don't care how you do it, and we're fine paying taxes, we could pass, we're legally allowed to impose a utility tax. We've not done it. We're one of the few cities in Snohomish County that does not have a utility tax. 6% is allowed maximum by the state. We can impose that immediately. We could use that to pay off a bond, and we could probably do an $80 million facility and just pay for it over time from that tax alone. But we don't know that they want that. We know that some folks would love a community center or a performing arts center, but there's an assumption that I think they expect us to do it in a fiscally appropriate manner. So I don't know how, I don't know. So if we were to get some input, I would like to know, would you be comfortable with a 2% utility tax? You don't currently have that. People talk about the sales tax, highest in the state. Well, we have a very incremental increase on our sales tax. It was passed by the voters for public safety. We didn't impose that, the voters did. And they do not pay a utility tax. Again, one of the very few cities in the state, in the county, that don't have that. And it's something that maybe someday will make sense for us to have. But right now, I'm kind of proud of the fact that we've gotten this far without it. We've tried to do right by our taxpayers all the way. But we don't have a facility like this. A lot of cities have a community center. A lot of cities have a performing arts center. A lot of cities have these amenities that we don't offer. So.
And we don't have much debt. Most
And we-
cities have a utility tax and significant debt. We have I think the surface water bond is about the extent of what we have right
Yeah,
That's
we
a
had to
revenue
do it.
bond. That's not a general fund bond, it's a revenue bond. Yeah. So you have not used any of your property tax debt
I
capacity.
mean, we could do this. We definitely could do it. I mean, if we knew without a doubt that citizens of this city want a performing arts center, and we don't care what it costs, we could come up with a project that we could do with either borrowing money or funding it through some sort of a tax source, like maybe a utility tax, not even a 6%. But I don't know that, I mean, I've historically fought against utility tax. I mean, people that have, the input I've gotten is we don't want that.
Let's hold off trying to fund something yet, but I think it's a good point. There, you know, I think at some point that the people's willingness to pay and how you can pay for it will be relevant. First, we need to really get a better sense of what y'all want to do, and then try to check that back in with the community. I'm going to go back down the line, maybe get one last set of ideas, and then we'll play with dots. I think, yeah. That's the goal. Anything you want me to add up here?
Sure. So I think the next step might be getting numbers to paper, just basic guidelines of what all of our different ideas may cost. That way we can then go to the citizens with a survey, showing them what the options are, what the costs could potentially be, and what effect it would have on their bottom line.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Brown?
I think I've got an idea there.
Okay. Councilmember
I think I'm good too.
I think I'm interested in Mark's point, just on the utility tax. I don't know what a 2% would mean. You know, he's right, we've historically been opposed to it, but the reason we've been opposed to it is most jurisdictions use it just to plug their general fund. And so I think a lot of us, if not most of us, have ever thought that if we ever did a utility tax, it wouldn't be to fill the holes, it would be to do something for the community like this. So I just like to have an idea of what would a 1%, 2%, 3%, just what would that mean in our city potentially? So that we kind of work in the opposite side from Councilmember Morgan, rather than looking what the cost is, what is, if that was the main funding mechanism, you know, what could that generate? What options does it give us? That might help narrow our vision if that's one of the potential funding sources.
And that's only a portion of it, right? We'd still be looking at partners, we'd still be looking at.
Oh, no, absolutely, but I'd like to know what is that potential here?
How much do we put in the pot?
Right, yeah. Okay. Councilmember Kevler.
I think we're good. I'm good.
The only thing I'd like to add, I don't know if this is what you're looking for, but as we've gone down this road, I just wanted to articulate this, clarify. I am not a fan of just a standalone performance center. I'm clearly a fan of a combination community center and performance space. I want to make sure that that's really clearly articulated. I don't see us building a standalone, high-tech, gorgeous, state-of-the-art Cecil B. DeMille performance theater. I do love the idea of the civic center with a performance space. I think that's what we need, because really we're servicing our community here and building communities. I want to make sure that's very clear that I would be supportive of combining those two, but not separating them. Okay.
I'm in favor of that as well. I think that's the better
Motions.
project. But I think that Stephanie made a good point, and we're not there yet. We're still brainstorming and dreaming big today. But at some point, we need to laser in. And if we all agree on what John just said, yep, we agree. That's what we're looking for. At some point, we need to laser in on that. And we may say, we're going to keep some ball field space open if we've got options. We've realized in our exercise just now, we have a lot of space. We have a lot of options. And I'd also be interested in talking about, what is the way of possibly, like John and I's model, we essentially sold the church property and used the revenues from that to offset the costs. I mean, there's a variety of ways to do that, but that's just simplifying it. So is that something we want to talk about, or is that not what we want? We want to keep all this property available because, you know, they're like Mark Twain said, they're not making any more. So, you know, maybe hold on to it. It's not going to hurt us.
Yeah, we'd like to get a valuation on the 527 frontage.
The church property.
Yeah, the church property. That frontage is the most valuable piece.
I think we had a valuation, we had it appraised when we bought it.
No, but things have changed since we bought it.
Not much.
The real estate market.
No, 18 months.
What's it zoned as?
It's gone up like 26%. Where's the map?
Yeah, last month went up 22%.
We were one of the only two bidders for the property we bought. It has been on the market for a while.
Well, I don't want to talk about settlement property that we worked so hard to acquire. I mean, me personally, it's an idea to kick around and maybe lease out some of the space. Yeah, I'm on board with that, but
However we want.
I think we've got a good footprint idea, and I think all can be accommodated with our visions up there if we can just figure out how to phase it in properly. And I'm not a fan of debt, but I'm open to the conversation and, you know, put that to the voters as well. You know, if they want to dream big, it's got to be paid for. I mean, it comes down to that same principle.
Okay.
To Mark and Stephanie's point, from those the felt things we did, no, the layouts that we did, the three layouts, I think we are honing in the vision. I think the only disagreement, I think one of the plans, you guys have one of yours? Yeah. Did you have it? Yeah. I mean, all of them had a performing arts center, community center, boys and girls club, and some aspect of sports. So, I mean, I think we are.
We didn't have a voice.
We did not have a voice.
That was the one there's one that didn't have something.
I'm not against it. We could, I mean, we could, it's just, I don't want to be too ambitious and get lost because we just.
I was just worried about how much space they would need to.
But I think we're honing in more on that vision than we may think we are.
I agree.
I do agree.
Yeah.
You are.
I was looking at the crosswalk and the types of field, there wasn't unanimity. And there wasn't unanimity on the Boys and Girls Club or the disc golf. Or the private restaurant use, but everybody was around smashing together performance space and community center. Some of you had the Boys and Girls Club added on to that. Everybody had some ball fields. Anybody want to say anything further, posit something that you think might be part of a common vision here?
So one of the things I saw as part of the common vision is that if we were to do that, it's combined performance space and community center.
Yeah.
And combined ball fields and Boys and Girls Club. Those to me are those things, because Boys and Girls Club makes use of fields. It seems from what they talked about, from what I think we would have. So I think that it'd be a good pairing for both of those. It's not to say ball fields and Boys and Girls Club has to be at the same time, but I think they pair well.
What do you
I think
think,
also
Beth?
the Boys and Girls Club can be, depending on the agreement we have, they can build in a way where they have community center space and performing arts center alongside of them operating part. So that's where I get to be like, I don't know if the best option is with Boys and Girls Club to do this or to do a standalone. As far as the community center with the theater. So I think that's something that has to be kind of
You have to fact check
hashed
that out.
out,
Yeah.
the differences there to be able to really make that solid decision.
Is this idea of adding, linking some ball fields to this, or the ball, everybody had ball fields, but maybe your vision around ball fields was, this is for tournaments, it's not for, is this okay, or does this look, because
We didn't, John and I were not thinking tournaments. We were just throwing in some ball space, field space to enhance the sports park a little bit, create some extra uses, but we didn't embrace the tournament idea.
There is common vision that we should use the Cook properties for parking.
Yes.
Let's just get that one,
All that's good for it.
done, check that box off.
and have a trail link.
Sure.
I mean, we could, that's another thing, the Cook property, which I think would be good for parking, probably more than any other use, could also be sold.
We should. Anything else you want to offer up here? And if something good is like, man, I really can't go, John, let us know. But anything else you'd offer up? Do we have consensus around X? Let's play that game. This is pretty good. Yeah, so the next step's really, can it all fit? Really? So we'll definitely have to have fun with shapes and a real life planet. So anything else? This is for, yeah. Okay, so the dots, we may be well beyond dots. We might not need to do it, even though you all have dots. We can like tag each other with dots or something. But this was, and maybe we should just, this is the combination facility idea, and I'm just gonna put boys and girls and fields.
Karen, do we know if Boys and Girls Club has those hybrid facilities where they have maybe their, like, let's say they have their structure in the middle and then attached is a, place to do performing or whatever we're talking about.
I don't know, other than the facilities that we presented to you, I think, but so the Bellevue one has 4 balls and basketball courts and meeting rooms. And it's got a whole bunch of fields adjacent to it. The city paid for the site improvements and they own the land, but I think they own the building and Boys and Girls Club maintains it.
I think that's one area where we need more discussion. We keep talking about a community center, and I'm not sure we have a common understanding of what that community center means.
Yeah.
I mean, I envisioned when we started talking to Boys and Girls Club, a facility with them with additional community space. So when we talk 30,000 square feet for community center, I don't know what it fills up, what people are contemplating fills up that 30,000 square feet.
But we
So
can do some exercises around that. We can break it down into component uses by square foot.
I think that'd be helpful for us to start identifying, you know, if we
Yeah.
did a community center, are we gonna put our Parks and Rec department up? Do we want senior center space? What do we want in the way of, do we want a gymnasium that could be co-used if there were a Boys and Girls Club? What kind of community meeting space do we need? Are we talking the size of rooms like what they have out at Willis Tucker in their facility? I think we need to start putting some definition. If we want a community center, what does that mean? What does that look like? Whether it's standalone or part of something else, what are the elements of the community center we would want?
I'd like to know, and I don't know how we'll get this information. A corporate sponsor, they look for certain projects. Performing Arts Center is good because typically the arts struggle. They don't have money. They don't necessarily pay for themselves, and yet regularly people say, we see value in this. You know, we like that the high school can use the facility to do a performance, the local dance troupe can do a recital or whatever. And so I think corporate sponsors sometimes look for something like that, perhaps more than a ball field, where there's other sources for that. I don't know, I'm speculating, but I would like to know if there's a way to track down what would a corporate sponsor be looking for in a project like this, where they might go, yeah, I could get on board with this, or no. Is that fair?
Good question. Okay.
And that goes to where I believe that there are consultants who do this for companies. They find the sponsors, they help in that. That's where their specialty is.
Okay, that's good.
Also, is there a specific type of spaces that we're more likely to get grants from the state for?
Typically with grants, they partnering like Brian was talking about with the county and with other partners, you know, regional partnerships seem to have access to more grant funds. So that in line with that,
Yep.
you know, do we go broader than Mill Creek to try and qualify for these bigger grants?
Yeah, so the county, they have a fund, and 10, 20 years ago, performance spaces was the thing. And now it's more, I've been told, it's more shifting to ball fields. So
Yeah,
that doesn't mean it won't shift again.
Well, I'm just
Hayfield
thinking that
changed that.
Mount Lake Terrace and Lake Stevens, they've been going to state legislature and getting funds for their visions, for their renovations, for their city cores and things like that. So what type of things could we possibly go to the state legislature and get funds for?
We never needs to ask, it's my favorite. Just decide what you want, go ask. Right? Okay, everybody okay with this as sort of starter sets for common vision? This is pretty awesome to actually look this far. This is great. I mean, I was really happy to see that the uses were so aligned when we did the maps. So thank you, Mayor, for pulling that. But that's important. We were gonna like have you all say, I'm ready to let go of any of these things, but I'm not here. I'm hearing that you guys want to keep all of these things on the table. But in some pretty specific configurations, a combo facility for this and this, and then link the Boys and Girls Club in the ball fields is another major use. And this is like, yeah, let's fit that in. If we can fit that in, let's do that.
Yeah.
So I'm not.
I realize, yeah, it sounds kind of goofy, like, where we want it all, but at the same
It's
time.
okay.
Well, usually, I see ways in which we say those natural lands and trails, that they fit in between, especially in the site with the wetlands buffer. It's ideal for us to appreciate that on the property and not plow.
And you also have one of the largest fir trees, I think, that this versus spruce or cedar on the church property that I have seen anywhere.
It was
Very long
huge.
time.
It's huge.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
huge.
that was one of those, like, you have to build around it.
Right.
And I think we have narrowed our vision further. I mean, there's been some talk about whether John talked about whether we just do a performing arts center, and I think there's consensus that we don't want to do a standalone performing arts center. Just as I didn't see any one of the groups put out a layout that's just a regional ball field facility. So in that respect, I think we are
Yes,
narrowing things down and taking things off the table.
yes.
I agree. There's definitely a lot more consensus here. And I've said that since we started. I think there's an opportunity here. Again, nothing's been taken off the table. How much can we get in there? I think the big question is even a generalized price tag is necessary, right? If you really want it, that's the awkward question we're going to ask voters, how we're going to fund it. Or we throw the word grant out there and we'll call this county and that legislator in. But it's going to have a funding source going forward too.
You
So
need
it's
skin
going
in
to
the
involve
game to
tax.
make your grant to try, right?
One thing we have talked about those, a lot of the, and Brian, you kind of lived, Mayor, you lived this, what are we actually looking for in a community center? What are we envisioning? Because it's kind of hard to ask them to come up with any kind of pricing or something. We haven't talked about here.
No, we need to
So,
do that.
you know, that vision of what are we looking for, and what we listened to about the other community center that was on the call yesterday. The part that I got out of it was a space for the community that has that allows them to come together, and it had large enough rooms, large enough space. It wasn't really as much that they provide services or the tools or the disco places, or even the basketball courts. But what they provided was these large various spaces for community to come together to utilize to run dance classes, to run events, to do those and other things that people want to do to bring your community together. That was the gist of what I saw in the community center. You know, that gave you specifics. That was kind of the mission that I saw in the community center. A multitude of spaces to allow our community to come together, because there are limitations today. We don't have. We have rooms that we can rent next door. They're limited. The space is limited. There's some issues with HVAC. There's other issues. It's a challenge. There is no large space anywhere in Mill Creek.
So here's what you guys said, maybe you should take, we got 5 and then we can probably wrap, but here's what we said about community centers. First thing we talked about tonight, after we talked about, we said rooms for seniors, basketball courts, large multi-purpose rooms. And then we had early learning funding, so that might be a little space. So what would you add to this in your vision, what's in a community center? Is there something that's not in a community center? Either one is helpful.
Possibly with a large multi-purpose, kind of like a banquet hall type of scenario where there's movable walls to make additional rooms. Expand them as needed for large events, weddings, that type of
Do you want a commercial kitchen space?
I'm not 100% sure we want to do that for a number of reasons, but I was thinking of the Collin Park facility coming soon is going to have a kitchen, commercial kitchen space.
I think it might
So, I don't
depend. What if you set a community center that's back in that wetland area, has nice natural setting, and it becomes a popular wedding venue? You might want a commercial kitchen there to facilitate rentals of that space.
Sure, but most caterers can bring in the food. Once you get into commercial kitchens, you've got health codes and violations and issues that can make it complicated.
One of the other issues is liability, yeah.
And liability and such, but I think it would be, when you say banquet hall, I've clearly seen a banquet hall facility, a place. I can remember one council member here talking about hotels, just because we don't have a big enough banquet space for anybody to use, there's no space like that in our city.
I was sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just don't like the kitchen idea, but I like maybe a prep area or a back room or something like that. But keeping the community center as simple as possible for our city to run, and really make its focus more just providing spaces for our citizens to get together and put on their own events and functions, and providing a space to do a children's preschool course or a senior center that wants to do a dance line class or something like that, giving them that kind of a space that they don't have today.
Yeah, what I was interrupting you about, so, and I apologize, was I really hope to get the people that are running the Tukwila Community Centers. They have like 3, that massive one, I shared the floor plan too. And they just put in a really small one that has about 2 meeting rooms, but it hasn't one kitchen, because they have found that they can maximize their rentals with that. It does create staffing needs in terms of being darn clean all the time, But that's something that they have been replicating, and they just were like, no, we're too busy, we can't come, but I'm hoping to maybe find somebody that can talk about the pros and cons of different types of community facility configurations, but that's not, certainly not my bailiwick.
So in addition to that, the same hall, I like the idea of bank halls and like that, especially with movable walls, because I like the idea of rooms that are of differing sizes, say for 6 people to meet in, or 20 people to meet in, those types of things. The Snohomish Library, for instance, has a room that you can check out, that I think is 25 people, something like that. Then I feel like that would be a great, I can see a need for at least 2 different groups I know in Mill Creek that would like to use something like that. So that's something I would like to see, is a couple of different small spaces like that. And it's the type of thing where offsites, retreats could go to this space where, hey, we need space for 20 people. We need space for 12 people.
Got it. Okay. Anything else?
I wanted to go back to the kitchen space.
Yep.
So I think, and then John said, or Councilmember Steckler said, the food prep, that now you mentioned, I can see that the need for some kind of kitchen space, however that is, if we want to have basements there, because if you are going to have a wedding catered there or something of that magnitude, you need somewhere for them to send the food out, even if it's not, they're not selling the food and the caterers just brought it in. To be able to prep it, yes, to be able to get it together, to be able to bring it out. And that kind of space would be very helpful for facilitating people actually using that for big events. So now you mentioned it, I think that is something that
The type of difference is whether we would allow cooking.
yeah.
Frying, and I know it has all different types of fire extinguishing requirements.
Yep.
That if we didn't have that,
Massive.
then it's, okay, you have a clean area that you can put out a layer of, a smorgasbord. Great. I think that's the kind of thing that we're talking about.
A prep kitchen is good, a cooking kitchen is challenging.
So yeah, a place where they could have refrigerators and things like that, but not necessarily where we're having a actual company make food out there to sell.
Got it. And I don't know what, to the extent you're trying to accommodate senior uses, how many of those types of facilities have some kind of a kitchen to go with them? Yeah, this is just some more stuff to try to, let's figure that part out, see what do we need to maximize the demographics. Okay, so I think you guys can take those dots home if you want, or you can just stick them all around and whatever. But I don't think we're gonna need those. And so let's just sort of recap and figure out where we're going from here, and then you guys could do sort of last go to the order thing. I think we got a lot of really good intel in terms of why you like these various different types of uses and some of the concerns you have, and all of them. That is really helpful, and we will write all this up. And I think the fact that we've got really good ideas also about some of the steps that we want to, these are sort of the stuff, some of the data gaps that we're going to need to start filling in. That's super helpful, and we'll try to put together something like a plan for the retreat in September that addresses some of these. I don't think it's all. And I think this is the biggest takeaway and most exciting thing, is that we actually found a lot of common vision through the exercise and the discussion. So I think this is the most, for me, this is the most exciting thing we actually got here. And so the truthing this out with the planners will be really fun part. And I think this was kind of interesting. Obviously, don't over stress on the data, but we can still, we'll make sure all this stuff is written up for you. And I think I'm happy that we got through everything and more that I was hoping that we would get through tonight. So just for one last round for good of the order, and we'll let everybody go home for the night. It's been a long week already. So, Mark, anything you want to say in the closing out here?
No, I appreciate everything you did to help us move this ball down the field. Thank
Total
you.
team
Thank you,
effort, these
staff.
guys and
Appreciate
Naomi getting us ready for tonight, and belts and everything. I mean, all kudos to those gentlemen. Yeah. Councilmember Steckler?
I've been through so many of these in my career. This was excellent. Thank you to everybody for all of your input, the time you put into putting this together. Karen, thank you for facilitating it. The end result is what makes it. We got a clearer vision. We got a better consensus. Very good job, all of you. Thank you so much. And I'm very appreciative. Thank you.
Yeah, ditto. Good job, everyone.
Mayor?
Ditto, we were here till 10 last night, so ditto.
Thank you for facilitating and guiding us. And I think this is really helpful, and it's nice to see us start to come around
I'm
and
so
coalesce
excited by
around
that.
the common vision. And that's really hard to bring us all to that place. So thank you for everybody for all your work to help us come to this point.
Agreed, this was great. I especially liked the felt forwards. I really think that helped a lot. Good work.
Kindergarten.
Yeah. Sometimes the simple things actually really help. So I think it was really good for us to get that opportunity to do that and figure out, okay, how could we work this? So thank you.
I think this was fantastic to solidifying a common vision amongst the council. I'm equally excited as you with the common vision board. It seems simple, but it's actually much more monumental than you think. What surprised me most of all was the felt boards and how similar all of our designs were without even looking over at the other board and seeing what other people were doing.
That's amazing.
So that is a huge step in the right direction, and I think we're making fantastic pace with this.
Well, thank you all, and thanks again to Tom and Mike for putting together the felt. Other duties as assigned, cutting felt, right? Okay. Last words, Mayor, anyone, and Michael?
No, this feels good. It feels like it's starting to levitate, and we're speaking in unison on a certain frequency that will energize us for the next leg of the journey. We'll talk about it in September. We're tracking in terms of how we want to fund what comes out of the retreat and mini retreat in September for us to bake into our budget. So, thank you. Thank you for everything. Karen, thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Felt wins.
Thank you, Barb, for coming and being here too.
Yes,
Karen, you
All right, see you back there.
You guys can have fun with dogs however you like. Give them to Clara. Okay? Yeah, Cora. Just Cora like dogs. Cora. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
Thank you, Karen. If there's no objections, we'll adjourn the meeting at 7:52.